Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a very windy, very Baltic Vicarage Road, where Norwich City have been beaten by 3-2 against Watford here this afternoon. And look, we've stood here plenty of times this season and spoken about defeats, yes, but also about defeats where Norwich have been hapless, or they've been booed off, or there's been real frustration around the level of their performance because it was too low. I think today is probably the opposite of that, where the frustration is different, because I stand here today feeling like Norwich probably deserved more from that game. That there were lots of elements of that performance that we can take and we can move forward. I mean, you can see how much it's windy. You can just see the bouncer. Hopefully, it's not coming across too badly on the microphone, but I'm sure you'll shout at me, and I can always turn around if not. But yeah, a very different type of frustration here this afternoon for Norwich, in that there were lots of elements of that performance to hold on to, and that hopefully they can take forward, because it was another step in various aspects, but ultimately probably a game that was concluded and finalised by really soft defending at one end and a lack of clinical edge in the other in the second half, and that has cost them really at least a point, but probably what they deserved, which is 3 points from this game. And I think probably where we're going to be later on in this video talking about squad depth and the options not currently available to Philippe Clement, because if he would have had those options, if Norwich City would have had two natural fullbacks on the pitch, I think they'd have won this game today. And that's the biggest frustration around where we stand here today. And that is, in many ways, it's positive to have a different sense of frustration. We're not talking about a Norwich team that didn't turn up, that didn't perform, that weren't at the level, that didn't get anywhere near their opponents. That simply was not the case. This was competitive. It was a real slogfest of a championship game, very open. Both teams pretty poor defensively. And yeah, Norwich will be frustrated that they've come away on the wrong end of a 3-2 result to Watford again here. I remember it being the case a couple of years ago. I think it was under David Wagner when Hwang and Bart fired them. It might have been 2-0 that night, and they went on to lose 3-2. And I think they played probably a little bit worse than they did here this afternoon. Let's get into it then. Norwich made one change to their starting lineup. That came at left back and was a little bit of a surprise one, really. Tony Springett handed his first Norwich City start since Swansea in April 2023. I think a 2-1 defeat. I think under David Wagner at that point, maybe at the back end of David Wagner. So minutes for him in a position that we've not seen too much of him in 2.5 years or so since his last Norwich City start, and that really meant Norwich were limited in terms of the change that they made. They could get McConville at centre back. Shane Duffy's slight injury setback hadn't helped in terms of the various pieces on the chessboard that Philippe Clement had available to him to utilise, to move. But yeah, Spring it in at left back, and otherwise it was as you were from that win over QPR last weekend, where Maatsen and McLean in midfield, Forson got another go, Schwartau got another go, Marcondes behind Josh Sargent as well. And inside the opening 16 seconds or so, Norwich City had a shot on goal. They worked the ball to Marcondes, fired a shot over the bar. They had another moment later as well. There was intent, and I think what we found in that first half was Watford, the way they played their 4-4-2, there was huge gaps between the lines, but Forson and Schwartau in particular did an excellent job at just playing between them and getting Norwich on the front foot and getting them in transitional moments forward with intent and with pace and with directness, all elements we probably haven't seen, which really is where the first goal comes from, a transitional moment. Norwich break into Watford's half. Schwartau works it nicely on the left, finds Pelle Maatsen, gets it back to Oscar Schwartau, shifts it onto his right foot, and it's the type of cross that I think Josh Sargent's eyes will have lit up at. It's the type of opportunity he will have been waiting for a prolonged period of time, leading that Norwich City attack. Sumptuous ball to the back post. A brilliant bit of movement, though. He's on the balls of his feet. He's able to get past and get ahead of his defender, which I think was Ngakia, and plant the header down into the ground and up. And Baxter could do very little about it from close range. And Norwich were ahead, and I think deservedly so as well in that particular moment. And they had more opportunities as well prior to Watford's equaliser. Before that, really, Watford hadn't threatened too much. They'd limited the amount of opportunities that Watford had. Norwich were in the ascendancy. The home crowd were getting frustrated because of the levels of control and threat levels that Norwich City were having here. And yeah, other moments that they created, positive attacking moments where they had overloads or, just in transition with regularity. They won the ball, they played it forward quickly. Those quick regains that I think we've seen pretty early doors that Philippe Clement wants his side to have. And Norwich got on the front foot and got at Watford, and Forson, I thought, and Schwartau were electric really for that opening sort of 20-minute spell where Norwich were on top. And then the game they didn't flip, but Watford began to feel their way slowly into the game, regained a little bit of control, and began to put Norwich under a little bit of pressure. There was a moment down the left where Chikata, who's a very good player, worked his way into the penalty area, and that set the tone. Then there were a couple of set pieces where they began to look a little bit threatening, and that ultimately is where the first goal would come. And a theme of this afternoon for Norwich City, which is soft defensive goals. I think they'll be really frustrated they've conceded. The corner comes in from the right hand side, whipped to it's cleared initially, and Gakia then returns it. Kajumgard, I'm going with, hopefully that's right, puts it back across goal. Pollock with the header. Kovacevic then palms it out, but straight to the Danish forward, who has an empty net really, just to head it back across goal and into the net for the equaliser. 4 free headers, I think, are counted in that move. Then, of course, there's a question mark over whether Vladan Kovacevic could have held that ball. He's got to do one of two things. You've got to hold it and take it and jump on it. And if you don't feel you can do that, and you feel like you're stretching to get to it, then the punch and the connection on the ball, it needs to be a motion to push it out wide and push it away from danger. In truth, he did neither of those things. Didn't catch it, didn't push it away from his goal, pushed it back into the mix. And it's a goal that I think Norwich City will be disappointed to concede. And of course, look, Kovacevic individually has some responsibility to take for that, but equally the four opportunities, the 4 free headers that Norwich City had to clear that out of their own box. I think Philippe Clement will be really disappointed with their inability to clear that ball. And then in truth, I thought the game entered a little bit of a lull between that period and Norwich City's second goal, where it was kind of end-to-end stuff, quite frantic, but Watford had probably a lot more of the ball without conjuring up too much in terms of opportunities. And again, that will be the frustration from a Norwich City perspective. And then really a moment of brilliance from Kenny McLean, who drops the ball into Josh Sargent. It's an excellent first touch where he's running towards goal, takes it into his stride, gets it out of his feet. A lovely shot that is saved by Baxter. And then all credit to Emi Marcondes. I think most players running onto the ball in front of goal, albeit at an angle, in their head would think, shoot, goal, score. He didn't. He just took an extra second, an extra touch, which actually forced him wider. Looked up, saw Oscar Schwartau at the back post. It's a brilliantly clipped ball into his path to slot in for 2-1 at a brilliant time, just before half-time. Norwich City heading into the break with the lead, regaining that, and putting themselves in a really good position here on the road. And then I think probably a multitude of factors kicked in the second half. Probably not sure. Well, it's only Callum Fisher, isn't it, in terms of the choice of fullback naturally and fit ones they've got. Tony Springett, I thought was steady, but I think you could see the rustiness to his game and his decision-making, his fitness levels. There was a moment where he was beaten for pace in the 17th minute where he looked like he was huffing and puffing, which you can understand given the length of time that he's been out with that back issue. But again, Norwich shuffle it, I think just 10 minutes or so into the second half. Springett comes off, Medic comes on, Fisher moves to left back, McConville moves to right back, and Medic slots in. And from there, Watford, I think, probably sees and smell blood a little bit down that left-hand side, Norwich's right-hand side, where McConville, who has been excellent in the past couple of games, but isn't a right-back, physically doesn't have that pace, and Mamama had him really in terms of in behind, but also with some of his quick touches and trickery, and that's where the goal comes from, not specifically from McConville, but Watford get off the back. I think it's Bowler gets off the back of Makama, who is just unable to track his runner. A lovely, this is the third goal I'm talking about, isn't it? The second goal is somewhat different, and we'll come to that in a moment. But that shows how frantic the game is. I've already skipped to the third goal. But yeah, Watford just began to seize a little bit of the initiative after there. They had some more opportunities and worked the ball a little bit better. The second goal, the ball was worked out to the right hand side. A cross comes in, and Medic it's frustrating because having watched it back, he gets the arm. He has the arm exactly where he wants. He has the distance. He can feel his man, and then within the blink of an eye, Kajumgard is past him and plants a lovely header. To be fair, really well executed to get the direction, the power, and the pace on it that he does into that far corner. Yeah, it's an excellent header, but it's frustration from a Norwich City perspective because again, it's so preventable in terms of the cross initially, and then the way that Medic should and doesn't chaperone the Danishman or the Danish striker to prevent him from getting the first contact and getting a march on him and getting those yards ahead of him. And as I said earlier, I think if this game would have been played with Norwich City having two natural options and naturally fit options in fullback areas, I think they come away from this game with a victory, and that will be the biggest frustration for Philippe Clement. Even at 2-2, they have opportunities. The biggest one falls to Jovan Makama. Lovely run in behind. Schwartau picks him out. One-on-one, opens up his body. You're just waiting for the net to bulge in that far corner. But instead, he just overextends himself, really. He's so open, too wide, slightly off balance, and just kind of shanks it wide in the end. And that's a really, really big opportunity in the context of the game. 2-2, Norwich score that goal, and they have, about 20 minutes to see this game out. Instead, then we come to the third goal, which I was describing earlier, where Mamama, with an lovely outside the foot pass into space, but Bowler has just wandered through Maatsen and off the back of Makama. Makama probably doesn't track back, doesn't spot the runner from deep, which he should do. He is then in space to cut the ball back. Kellen Fisher slips, unfortunately, which is a shame because, again, thought he had a good game in truth. And then Ince kind of puts it goalwards. It deflects off the forearm of Kovacevic and into the back of the net for 3-2, which felt like a killer blow. And again, isn't what Norwich City deserves. But that lack of ruthlessness at one end with Makama, and then that second of switching off at the other end has cost them at least a point here, which they would have been very, very good value for and would have kept going for. And it's now 4 points from 4 games. That's a decent return, considering this team didn't look like it could win a game and didn't look like it was capable of getting points a couple of weeks ago. The fact we're stood here talking about what, in my view, what was another performance, great intensity, more individual progression, all of those aspects. If Norwich City play like this, they are going to get more points out of games than they lose. If they can correct the soft individual errors at the back and clearly get some players back to help this, I think in a way Philippe Clement will feel confident the way that they have played in aspects of this. But in those decisive moments in both boxes, they just lack the clinical edge, and in part that is a confidence thing at some points. If Vladan Kovacevic makes a different decision for the first goal, if Norwich City clear any of those headers for the first goal, if Medic doesn't allow Kajungar to run off him for the second, and then of course if Makama tracks his man for the third, all preventable goals that I think will be frustrating. And then at the other end, you look at the opportunities that Norwich City squandered. Jovan Makama, there was another one where Makama, with his pace and his power, got on the outside, cut the ball across, and Pollock does so well to just clear the ball over the bar. Josh Sargent has a tap in. Otherwise, there was a big chance for Jacob Wright as well at the end. McConville won a header at the back post from a Kenny McLean corner. It just drops beautifully for him. He meets it on the side foot, and it just deflects the wrong side of the post. Norwich City had opportunities. They had transitional moments that I felt were really positive. There was that intensity we saw again. I want to shout out Pelle Maatsen, who looks transformed, looks a completely different player to what we saw 4 or 5 weeks ago. I didn't see this kind of big tackling, crunching, industrious, free lungs, if we want to use the Norwich City analogy, midfielder in any really of the games he played prior to Philippe Clement coming in charge. And he just looks transformed in terms of the way he's winning the ball, the intensity that he's giving, the balance that he's giving Norwich City's midfield, and then the simplicity of message from there. Regain the ball, play forward. Very simple, very basic, but that is what Philippe Clement has tried to get this group to play with. Intensity, and I thought they did that. I thought it again, maybe probably a fitness point. I thought the last sort of 20 minutes, the pressing element regressed slightly and kind of retreated slightly, but the counter pressing was strong, both in terms of structure and in terms of intent. And endeavour as well. And again, I just thought this was a much improved performance in, sadly, a game that is a defeat and Norwich City walk away with no points. But you look at the trend generally since Philippe Clement has come in, that really bad defeat at Birmingham, which was a really poor performance, a 4-1 defeat where I wasn't at the game, but certainly Sam's report and obviously watching the highlights and whatnot. Norwich didn't deserve anything. I don't think you can really hold Clement to account on that one, given he was in the building for 3 days and hadn't had a training session. But that was a bad one. You look at the kind of upward trend they've been on in terms of performances. They should have beaten Oxford. They did beat QPR, and I think they should at least have got a point here today in terms of the chances they created. Not necessarily more of them, but definitely a higher quality of them. And I think you can see that in terms of the expected goals numbers and all of those aspects as well. Norwich City created a good volume of opportunities today. It's not one of those days where we're talking about a lack of creativity. We're talking probably about finishing. And there was a moment again towards the end, an opportunity that I think maybe I did speak about, where Makama had a shot that Baxter palmed into Sargent's path and was an excellent bit of defending. So, yeah, 4 chances probably in that second half where they could have scored, didn't. And that's going to be the real frustration in both boxes today. But the general trend is improvement, which is good, albeit Norwich City needs the currency they're going to trade in is points. But I've said this a few times on these. I'm a firm believer if you can get a consistent level of performance, and Philippe Clement has come in and raised Norwich City's floor, I think in terms of those performance levels, the results will, I believe, follow. And I think we've seen that to an extent. 4 points from 4 games. It's a point a game. That's a better rate than what they were going under previously under Liam Manning, albeit in a very smaller sample size. But equally, probably not going to be enough to keep them up. They are still going to have to get that higher in terms of that threshold, which is why it would have been very useful. And again, it's worth making the point Watford have only lost here once this season, and that was to Blackburn in September. Obviously, Norwich won here in the League Cup as well earlier on in the season. So, yeah, look, frustration, but for probably better reasons, I would say, today in terms of that performance. I've spoken about Pelle Madsen. I want to speak about Oscar Schwartau as well, who I think generally this season has been pretty good in terms of the way that he's played, but probably lacked that end product. Did that today, and I think I read somewhere. I'm going to check this out, so maybe I shouldn't even say it, but I think I read somewhere he's doubled his goal contribution today for Norwich City in one game. The assist, yes. The goal, absolutely, although it was kind of made elsewhere. But again, and I should credit Josh Sargent as well, because it was a lovely bit of movement to create that space for Oscar Schwartau to head into, to slot the ball into the net. And it's good, on a different note, that Josh Sargent has got scoring. He loves playing at this place now. 7 goals here in Norwich City colours. 6 goals maybe, I think, here, in Norwich City colours. Which, and here's a stat for you, is more than he scored as a Werder Bremen player at Werder Bremen's ground. So there you go. That's how much Josh Sargent likes playing at Vicarage Road. But yeah, Schwartau, I thought, in terms of his end product today, which is something that I've been desperate to see him add, and I do genuinely feel that when he adds that, he's going to explode in terms of 19-year-old guy, a very, very talented technical player. There was a moment in the first half just down this side, actually, where he kind of kept the ball in tight spaces around 4 Watford players. The talent is there, the energy is there. Just need to see more in the final third, and that has probably been the challenge that I think Philippe Clement has given it to him. So yeah, look, the result, the performance, 2 different things today for Norwich City. But I think all of those in the away end, and I said I've been to all bar one away game this season against Birmingham. They haven't been nice places. They've been difficult when the players have headed over. Today there wasn't that. There was unity. There was recognition of their performance, and often that can be the best barometer for how Norwich City play. Get some players back, add some players in January, continue to work on those individual performances and getting those team performances in an upward direction. Norwich City will hopefully be okay this season, but we need to see a lot more of that over a longer period of time. The frustration is, as I said, that they haven't got anything from a performance which they really deserved. What is, I think, the start of a pretty tough week. Sheffield United, who are reinvigorated, they were winning when I came on here 1-0, and I think that would be 4 on the spin for Chris Wilder's team. Said it a few times, I don't really believe that they are going to be a team, if Norwich City are going to stay at this end of the division for the rest of the season, that Norwich are going to have to worry about. To be honest, I think their trajectory is up as well. But that's going to be a very difficult game at Bramall Lane, with the intensity and all of the aspects that is going to bring, particularly if they can't get any more defensive bodies back. And of course, the blow that Harry Darling today was actually the cut-off point, where if Harry Darling would have got through the game today, the threshold moves from 5 to 10 games. So at the final hurdle, he's picked up his 5th yellow card. It was just down below me, actually, when Mamama just ran into him, and it was body checked him, probably slightly harsh, but it probably was a yellow card. Kellen Fisher, thankfully, is the only fit Norwich City fullback at the moment, did get through it. So now the threshold for 10, that takes a little bit of pressure off some of those bookings as well. But Norwich is going to be without Harry Darling for that trip to Bramall Lane on Tuesday night, which probably makes it even more difficult than it feels like it's going to already be. And then Southampton as well, who've just appointed Tom Eckhart as their new boss. And he's won, I think, 4 out of 5 of his interim games in charge. So 2 really challenging games this week. For me, it's about getting more of what we saw today in terms of performance, because, as I said, if they can get more of that, if Philippe Clement can eke more of that out of them, you'd like to think that Norwich City will be okay this season, because for portions of that game, Norwich City weren't just going toe to toe with Watford. They were the better team than them, particularly in that first half. But yeah, still more work to do on the fitness, still more work to do tactically, still more work to do defensively, still more work to do in terms of adding that clinical edge. If Norwich City can achieve those things, then I think they can get themselves out of this really precarious situation that they are in. Pinker.com, the place to go throughout the rest of the day for all your coverage, analysis, and reaction to this defeat. We're going to make the short hop back to Norfolk now, 2 and a bit hours. Not too bad by our standards. And we will see you again on Tuesday night at Bramall Lane. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.